To the Bhagavatam. Today's episode deals with Dhruva, and we're going to talk about something that happens to all of us. We all experience pain, we experience suffering, we experience hurt, we experience sadness. This is the human condition, and there is no getting out of it, not for anyone. No matter how enlightened somebody is, no matter how awakened, no matter how evolved, the things of the world that happen will happen, right? We live in a time where there is so much change taking place right now. Some of you might be aware of these changes, some of you might not. For those of you that are, you realize that everything is in flux right now. Geopolitical situations are in flux, economies are in flux, social norms are in flux, and behind all of that, we have the emergence of artificial intelligence and so many other things going on. When there's change, we suffer because the human mind wants stability, it wants safety, it wants comfort, it wants ease. And we love that as human beings. But it's the nature of this world to constantly be changing. And therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls this world ashashvat. Shashvat means that which is steady, but ashashvat means the opposite of that which is constantly changing, temporary. He calls it ashashvatam, and he calls it dukhalayam, place of misery and suffering. So although we're constantly trying to find pleasure in this world, whether that pleasure is through food, whether it's through sex, whether it's through going to nice places, whether it's dressing up, or whether it's just somehow doing whatever feels good to us, we're constantly having to chase this thing called pleasure. And behind it is a hope for happiness. So between pain and pleasure, between suffering and happiness, we are tossed constantly. We are in a wheel of, or a cycle of, that is constantly going up and then down, up and then down. And it seems like there's no way to get off it. There is a way. And that way is presented in the Vedas, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where it talks about moksha or liberation or enlightenment. That the only way to get out of suffering and out of this catastrophic world that we live in, where everybody is born at some point and dies at some point, where everybody experiences hunger and thirst and old age and disease and all kinds of miseries, there is a way. And that way is the path of self-realization, the path of spiritual awakening, the path of enlightenment. That path begins at the point where you learn to conquer your mind. But that's just the beginning. Then, as you go forward, it's about being able to fix your mind on something of a higher vibration, that which is called the divine or God. And when you begin to meditate on that, you become immersed in that reality. That then begins to determine your state of mind or your consciousness. And when your consciousness has been elevated, then it no longer feels the pains and pleasures of the world the way you used to. Just as when you're in an airplane flying at 30,000 feet, you may feel some of those bumps out there, but if you were even beyond that, you probably may not feel any of it. But you definitely don't feel what you felt back down on earth, which is the heat, the cold, the hustle and bustle of the traffic, the pushing and shoving of people. You're situated in a different realm altogether. The realm of spirituality takes you to a place that is beyond the suffering of this world, beyond the mind. Because ultimately, if you think about it, where does suffering reside? It resides here, in the mind. There are three kinds of suffering that are talked about in the Bhagavad Gita, or actually in the Vedas. That is sufferings caused by other people. People say stuff to you, do stuff to you. Sufferings caused by nature. So Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik, and Adi Atmik. Sufferings that are caused by your own body and your mind, of which I would suggest that perhaps the sufferings caused by our own mind are the greatest. And so learning to overcome the mind and its tendency toward suffering, to hold on to pain, to hold on to the negative, to hold on to all that is not okay in the world. Our ability to steer out of that is the most important first step we will take. So now, today we're going to go into the life of Dhruva, a very great devotee, and we're going to see through his life how one can actually reach a place of enlightenment. Let's get started. So Dhruva was a young boy of 5 years old. And this is quite a fascinating story, and the stories are known to be histories of another time. These are not tales, these are spoken of by highly evolved beings who speak of them as Puranas, histories, itihasa. That means that which happened. And though sometimes it will seem fantastical to us, these are the stories of very determined beings, people who really took their life in their own hands and did something about it. They didn't sit around complaining. They didn't sit around trying to solve the problems of the world through external endeavor, but rather they solved the problems of the world through an internal shift. That's what we're going to see today. So Brahma, as we've talked of earlier, who is the creator of the universe, not God, in case you're coming here for the first time, Brahma, who is the creator of the universe, and there are many Brahmas, one in each universe, had a son called Swayambhuva Manu. And Swayambhuva, or Manu as we call him, he's considered the father of mankind. In you'll come across this word Manushya. Manushya means the descendants of Manu. We are all descendants of Manu. So he had a son named Uttanapad. I know the names might sound a little difficult, but I'll show you how it's written as well. So he had a son whose name was Uttanapad. Uttanapad was a king, and he had 2 queens. Of the 2 queens, one of them, Suruchi, was his favorite, and Suniti was not. So that was the other queen. So there was definitely some favoritism going on. One day when the king was playing with the son of Suruchi, his favorite queen, he had placed him on his lap. He placed the little boy on his lap. At the same time, the son of Suniti, the other wife, the boy's name was Dhruva, also wanted to get on his father's lap, but the king did not welcome him. Dhruva's stepmother, Suruchi, the favorite wife, chastised the boy. She says, "My dear child, you do not deserve to sit on the throne or on the lap of the king. Surely you are also the son of the king, but because you did not take birth from my womb, you are not qualified to sit on your father's lap. You should know that your attempt is doomed to failure. You are trying to fulfill a desire which is impossible to fulfill." So you can see her arrogance here. You can see how vain she is. She's been given all the attention of the king, and that's gotten to her head. She then continues. She says, "If you desire to rise to the throne of the king, then you have to undergo severe austerities, satisfy God, Narayan, and then when you are favored by him, you shall take your next birth from my womb." This woman's arrogance is incredible. So let's see if I can show you a picture of this scene. Here we are. That's Suruchi yelling at the boy. There's Dhruva who's standing, and there's the son of Suruchi on the lap of his father, King Uttanapad. There's another picture of that here. As the boy Dhruva gets hurt, very hurt, and walks away. As a snake, when struck by a stick, breathes very heavily, Dhruva, the young boy, the son of Suniti, having been struck by the strong words of his stepmother, began to breathe very heavily because of great anger. When he saw that his father was silent and did not protest, he immediately left the palace and went to his mother. When Dhruva reached his mother, his lips were trembling in anger and he was crying very grievously. Queen Suniti immediately lifted her son onto her lap, while the palace residents, who had heard all the harsh words of Suruchi, related everything in detail. Suniti, the mother of Dhruva, also became greatly grieved. Now, we've all gone through these kind of experiences where one or other parent of ours, maybe wasn't as fond of us. We need not have had a stepmother, or we may have had a stepmother for that matter, but someone, somewhere, spoke badly to us, and then we were hurt. And that wounding then sits with us, sits in our ego, sits in our mind, and literally shapes our life. So what do you think is going to happen to Dhruva? Is he going to go around feeling depressed? Is he going to seek a psychologist? Is he going to find a psychiatrist? Is he going to find himself anxious and fearful for the rest of his life? This incident, had it happened to me or to you, most of us, would have scarred us for life. It did have a huge impact on Dhruva. And let's see what he did with that. This incident was unbearable to the mother, Suniti. She began to burn as if in a forest fire, and in her grief and lamentation, she became just like a dried, burnt-up leaf. In other words, she became so sad, so heavily depressed, as she remembered the words of her co-wife, her bright lotus-like face filled with tears, and her body began breathing heavily as well. Unable to think of any remedy, she said to her son, "My dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others." So, the tendency we have is that when somebody says something bad to us, we think badly of them as well. We despise them. We are angry with them. We want to hurt them. We want to retaliate. So the first thing she tells her son is, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pain upon others suffers himself from that pain. This was said thousands and thousands of years ago. But in today's time, people say like this: hurt people hurt people. That is, people who are hurting inside will also try to hurt others outside. The way we treat others is so often the way we treat ourselves. And that's what she's saying here. Anyone who inflicts pain upon others suffers himself from that pain. And of course, karmically, you suffer again from that pain as well. What you do to others then comes back to you. She continues, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi is so because the king, your father, does not consider me his wife or even his maidservant. He feels ashamed to accept me. Therefore, it is a fact that you have taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman. My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi, your stepmother, although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your stepbrother, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother by worshipping the lotus feet of God. So she's saying that within your pain, there is great wisdom. See, for all of us, if we can take our pain, the sufferings we have, the hurt that we experience, whether in childhood or as an adult, and if we can turn that into something constructive, something that will uplift us, something that will make our life better, then it becomes a blessing. The very same thing that was the cause of our pain and suffering now becomes a blessing. And sometimes we never see the blessing. Sometimes we see it many years later. Sometimes we see it only at old age, and sometimes we see it when we're dying, and some people never see it at all. It's very tragic when that happens. I would encourage all of you to find the great wisdom and blessings hidden behind all the sufferings that you have experienced. Now, I know some of you will bring it up in the questions and will bring up, but I've gone through this and that. And where is the blessing in that? Can you think about it? If you lose a small child or a baby, something happens to them, or if something unforeseen happens to in your life, Where, it may be impossible to see the blessing in it. You may think, oh, this is all nonsense. There is no blessing in this. There is only pain. And if that is caused by God, I don't believe in such a God. Firstly, understand this. God is not personally responsible for any of the stuff that happens in our life. God is not a puppet master who controls everybody's life. God controls, he manages, or rather has people who manage the universe, and as such, being the master of it all, you could say the blame lies with God. But God is not actually doing anything. The doing is happening by other people. The doing is happening by ourselves. The doing is happening in our mind and how much attention we're paying to it and how much we're believing it. Keep in mind, the biggest suffering is here in our own minds. And to the degree that you believe in your mind and you pay homage to it and you are wrapped up in what it's telling you, the stories it's making up, yes, it is making up stories. There's what happened, and then there's the story your mind made up about it. To the degree that you are believing those stories is the degree to which you are suffering. We will see here now how Dhruva turns this story around with the help of his mother. So his mother then encourages him to take shelter of God. And she says that, my dear boy, you should also take shelter of the Supreme Godhead, who is very kind to his devotees. People seeking liberation from the cycle of birth and death always take shelter of his lotus feet. Without deviating for even a moment, they think of him within their heart and engage in serving him. As far as I am concerned, I do not find anyone who can mitigate your distress, except him, whose eyes are like lotus petals. Even exalted beings such as Brahma seek the favor of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. And she goes on trying to recommend to Dhruva that this is where he will find the greatest release from his suffering. So in those days, there were no psychologists. How do you release your suffering without a psychologist or a psychiatrist? This was how. In ancient times, they turned to God. Does that mean they spiritually bypassed and did not deal with their stuff? No. It means they dealt with it by bringing into their life a higher power, a higher energy, a higher awareness with which to look at the same problems. And when you look at the problems you have in life from a higher dimension, from a different level of consciousness, then you're able to shift the problem. As Einstein is rumored to have said, that you cannot fix or solve a problem from the same level of consciousness as where it was created. Wayne Dyer said that that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So by going to a higher level of consciousness, a greater level of awareness, you're able to shift the experience you're having. And this is the great takeaway from this whole story. These stories are designed, or rather these histories, I should say more accurately, are to show us how highly evolved beings dealt with the sufferings in their life and transformed them. And they are meant to be as an inspiration for us. So after deliberate consideration and resolute determination, Dhruva left his father's home. Now this little 5-year-old boy left his father's home and headed out towards the forest because he had heard that's where you can find God. People meditated on God in the forest and they were able to see him. So once he headed out, he was met on the way by his guru, Narad. Narad is a highly exalted being. And Narad came to see Dhruva, to see test his determination. The great sage Narad overheard the news, and understanding all the activities of Dhruva, he was struck with wonder. He approached Dhruva, and touching the boy's head and blessing him, he spoke as follows: "How wonderful are the happy Kshatriyas." Kshatriyas are warriors, or kings, or rulers. They cannot tolerate even a slight infringement upon their prestige. Just imagine, this boy is only a small child, yet harsh words from his stepmother proved unbearable for him. Now, a lot of us have said these things. We've said to our parents, "I'm leaving, I'm going." And some of us have even walked away as kids. And it's been, they've looked sometimes all over and found us and brought us home. But in this case, nobody came looking for the young boy. He did meet with Narad, his guru. Narad tried to discourage him. He says, "My dear boy, you are only a little boy whose attachment is to sports and other frivolities. Why are you so affected by words insulting your honor? If you feel that your sense of honor has been insulted, you still have no cause for dissatisfaction." This kind of dissatisfaction, is another feature of Maya, the illusory energy. In today's time, we might say, "Oh, it's just from your ego. Your ego is feeling bruised and hurt." And so Narad is trying to convince him in this way. Then he says to him, "You have decided to undertake the mystic process of meditation under the instruction of your mother, just to achieve the mercy of God. But in my opinion, such austerities are not possible for an ordinary human being. It is very difficult to satisfy God, the Supreme Godhead." So Narad tries in many ways to convince him. And when he finally fails, then he says, okay, if you insist on going. He even goes on to tell him, "Oh, your endeavor will not be successful. It is better you go home. When you are grown up by the mercy of God, you will get a chance to follow the path of the mystics." That used to be the way people did it back then. When they were older, they retired from family life, they would go into the forest or go into an ashram, and they would devote themselves to God. Just that, the time will come. You don't need to do it now. But the boy was adamant. So Dhruva said, "My dear Naradji, for a person whose heart is disturbed by the material condition of happiness and distress, whatever you have said so kindly might be helpful. But as far as I'm concerned, I am covered by ignorance. It means I'm really disturbed. I am agitated. This kind of philosophy you're trying to tell me doesn't touch my heart. I need a way out." Dhruva says, "I am very impudent for not accepting your instructions, but this is not my fault. It is due to being born in a Kshatriya, or a warrior, or a ruling family. My stepmother Suruchi has pierced my heart with her harsh words. Therefore your valuable instructions do not land well with me. I want to occupy a position more exalted than any yet achieved in the universe by anyone, even my father and grandfather. If you will oblige, kindly advise me of an honest path to follow by which I can achieve this goal." "You are a worthy son of Brahma," he tells Narad, "and you travel playing on your musical instrument. You travel the entire universe for the welfare of everyone. You are like the sun which rotates in the universe for the benefit of all living beings." So Narad, on hearing the words of Dhruva, became very compassionate toward him. In order to show him his causeless mercy, he gave him the following expert advice. Narad said, "The instructions given by your mother Suniti to follow the path of devotion to God is perfectly suitable for you. You should therefore completely absorb yourself in Him, for worship of His lotus feet yields the fulfillment of all one's desires." So Narad is still thinking, okay, this boy will pray to God and he'll get his desires fulfilled, I guess. Narad continued, "I wish all good fortune for you. You should go to the Madhuvan forest on the bank of the Yamuna river and there be purified. Just by going there, you will find yourself closer to God, who always lives there." So this is a particular forest near Vrindavan. And that is the birthplace of Krishna, and that is the place where you can feel his presence so vividly, so real, even till today. So he sends Dhruva there. And then he tells him the process. He tells him you should bathe 3 times a day in the waters of the Yamuna, because that water is very auspicious. It will purify you. It is very sacred water. After bathing there, you should perform the Ashtanga Yoga practice and then sit down in a calm and quiet position. Then practice the 3 kinds of breathing exercises, and thus gradually control the life airs, the prana, the mind, and the senses. Completely free yourself from all material contamination, and with great patience begin to meditate on the Supreme Godhead. So he's now giving him the process. He's telling him how to go about it. He tells him that the Supreme Godhead's face is perpetually very beautiful and pleasing to behold. Those who see him, he is always pleased and prepared to award benedictions. His form is always youthful, and every limb and every part of his body is properly formed, free from defect. His eyes and lips are pinkish like the rising sun. He is always prepared to give shelter to the surrendered soul, and anyone so fortunate to look upon him always feels complete satisfaction. So this is the advice of Narad. If you're going to go this way, all right, then here's what you need to be looking out for. He's not asking Dhruv now to go and call on some spirit guides. He's not telling Dhruv to go and call on some angels. He's saying if you are going to go and ask for your desires to be fulfilled, approach the Supreme Being and meditate and really dive deep, because then you will have his darshan. You will be able to see him. And when you have seen him, you will want nothing else. Narad knows that. He's not telling the boy that yet. He continues telling Dhruv, he says, real yogis meditate upon the transcendental form of the Supreme Being. He is known to them as Vasudeva, Narayan, or Vishnu. He stands on the whirl of the lotus of their hearts, the jewel-like nails of his lotus feet glittering. So the yogis meditate upon the Paramatma, the great soul, within themselves, and they see and feel and experience his presence within. And that deepens their meditation to such a degree that they completely tune out from the outer world. Narad continues saying, he is always smiling and looks very mercifully and is the bestower of all benedictions. One who meditates in this way, concentrating his mind upon the always auspicious form of God, is very soon freed from all material contamination. He does not come down from meditation upon that form. Then Narad gives him a mantra. A mantra is something that frees the mind. Man means mind and tra means to deliver, to free the mind. And he says one who chants this mantra for 7 nights can see the perfect human beings flying in the sky. The mantra is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'd like you to do it with me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Like this, he asks him to chant this mantra. This is the 12-syllable mantra for worshipping Krishna. One should install the deity or the physical form of God, and then with the chanting of the mantra, offer flowers and fruits and other varieties of foodstuffs according to your circumstances. If one was living just in, ideally one can offer him water and flower garlands and fruits and flowers and vegetables which are available. But if you're living in the forest, those might not be available. In which case, he tells Dhruv, you can offer him newly grown grasses and small buds of flowers, or even the bark of trees, and if by possible, tulsi leaves, which are very dear to him. He says normally one would worship a form that is made of earth or water or wood or metal. But in the forest, you can take some earth and create a form and worship that. You must practice having full control over yourself. So he says that is the external form. In the beginning, that is very important. But more important is learn to have control over yourself. Be very sober and peaceful and satisfied simply by eating whatever fruits and vegetables are available in the forest. My dear Dhruva, besides worshipping the deity and chanting the mantra 3 times a day, you should meditate upon the transcendental activities of the Supreme Godhead in his different incarnations. Now Dhruva would have heard these activities as you are hearing them now in the Bhagavatam. One should offer worship within the heart. So if initially the deity is outside, then eventually that deity is seen within the heart. Anyone who thus engages in worshipping God with devotion and sincerity, with mind, words, and body, will be blessed according to his desire. If a devotee desires material and sensual gratification or liberation from the world, he is awarded these results. But there's another deeper secret, that those who truly attain this darshan, this vision of the divine, of God, once they have that, they have found the greatest, the best, the most amazing thing of all, and they seek nothing else. That is the true sign of someone who has attained the highest goal of life. And that goal is the association of the divine. When you have the greatest thing, then why would lesser things be of any importance to you? If you have $1 million, $10 means nothing to you. But if someone only has $10, then it's a lot to them. Right? When we only have one house, it's a big deal. When you have 100 houses, one house is lost, okay. It's all right, we can live without it. When you have the king, the entire kingdom comes with that. And so it is that when you have God, you have everything. There is nothing else to be desired. He is the fulfillment of all desire. Otherwise, we're here hankering for one thing or another. But all of our desires are about trying to solve some problem. But all problems are solved when you have the association of God. Now, how can you have that association here and now? It is when you stop believing in your mind and start believing in God. And belief doesn't have to be like some faith thing. Belief can be something very deeply experienced. That's why you meditate. That's why you chant the mantra. That's why you worship the deity. That's why you serve God. By doing these practices, you develop a knowing. You develop an experience that lies within you now. You feel this inner peace. You feel this sense of contentment. You realize that nothing in the world compares to this feeling. I've often said it to people. I said, if you were to give me $1 billion or $100 billion and say, give up this peace that you have found within yourself, or this feeling of God that you have within you, I would say, no, I'm sorry. I don't mind having all that, but not at the cost of what lies within. This is the greatest treasure of all, what lies within you, what lies within all of us. Within all of us is the presence of God. The same as Dhruva is being told to meditate on here. So when Dhruva, the son of the king, was thus advised by the great sage Narad, he circumambulated, went around his guru, his spiritual master, and offered him respectful obeisances, bowed down to him. Then he started for the Madhuvan forest, which is always imprinted with the lotus footprints of Krishna, and which is therefore especially auspicious. After Dhruva entered the forest, Narad thought it wise to go see his father, the father of Dhruva, the king, to see how he was faring within the palace. The king received Narad properly. He welcomed him, as was the custom of that time. When a saintly person comes to your house, you give them the seat of honor. That is the Vedic culture. If you were a king, then you seat that saintly person on the throne. Most kings wouldn't do that. Oh my God, this person's going to take away my throne. No. A saintly person is not interested in anything, especially not even your throne, not your palace, not your wife, not your possessions, none of that. So very safely the king seats him on a seat of honor, and he then says, Narad begins to speak to him. He says, my dear king, your face appears to be withering up, and you look like you have been thinking of something for a very long time. Why is that? Have you been hampered in some way? And Narad knows the whole backstory, but he's not telling the king. He's just inquiring. You seem a little disturbed. What's up? The king replied, I am very much addicted to my wife, and I am so fallen that I have abandoned all merciful behavior, even to my son, who is only 5 years old. I have banished him and his mother, even though he is a great soul and a great devotee. My dear Brahmin, the face of my son was like a lotus flower. I am thinking of his precarious condition. He is unprotected and he might be very hungry. He might have lain down somewhere in the forest and the wolves might have attacked him to eat his body. So now the father in him is coming out. But at that time, he was under complete spell of his wife, completely under illusion, and therefore did not stand up for his son. Alas, just see how I was conquered by my wife. Just imagine my cruelty. Out of love and affection, the boy was trying to get up on my lap, but I did not receive him, nor did I even hold him for a moment. Just imagine how hard-hearted I am. And sometimes we all have this kind of experience, right? We're sometimes hurtful to somebody, and we realize later on how badly we treated them. And it's never too late for remorse. It's never too late to go back and reach out to them and say, listen, I really acted like a fool. I mistreated you. I am so sorry. I know that I really messed up things for you. It is always better to own up. We may still experience the karma of what we did, but there is great power in taking responsibility for where we messed up in our life. I did. You've done it. We've all done it. And it's important that we recognize that and ask the forgiveness of people who we have hurt. So here we see the king repenting. And then Narad replies to him. He says, my dear king, do not be aggrieved about your son. He is well protected by God. Although you have no actual information of his influence, although you don't know anything about his influence and how amazing he is, his reputation has already spread all over the world. My dear king, your son is very competent. He will perform great activities which would be impossible even for great kings and sages. Now you see, it's very interesting here. Narad is referring to the king's son as being very competent. Why? Because his son is engaged in tremendous meditations, tapasya, austerities, which would be difficult for even a king or a great sage to do. In today's time, we wouldn't give such importance to this. If our kid wanted to go off and become an ascetic, wanted to become a monk, wanted to renounce the world, we would be upset. We would be hurt. I know my parents were when I walked down that path in my 20s and became a monk. And most parents still today would be extremely hurt and upset. But Narad, who is a highly evolved being, thinks the opposite. He thinks that people who are in the world, struggling to have careers, go through colleges, get jobs, do all of that, they're the ones who are actually suffering in a very unfortunate condition. But someone who pursues the goal of life, which is to find God and to understand the deeper meaning and significance of who am I and who is God, and studies the Vedas or any other scripture for that matter, is highly blessed and fortunate and to be emulated. And such a person is someone to be greatly honored. Completely different set of values. Therefore the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that what is night for all beings is day for the introspective sage, and what is night for the sage is day for all other beings. In other words, they live in opposite worlds, completely different perspectives, completely different ways of looking at life. So Dhruva now, he's at the Madhuvan forest and following the instructions of his guru. The first month he ate only fruits and berries on every third day, only to keep his body and soul together, and progressed in his worship of the Supreme Godhead. By the way, if any of you haven't tried fasting, it really is amazing. I've been now doing it for 2 days in a row, my first time, and I plan to do it more and more. Maybe 3, maybe 5 days. But try it out. There's tremendous power in giving your whole body a break. And it also helps you. In the beginning stages, it's very powerful to see how your mind wants to agitate you, how your mind wants to pull you away towards food. And then you have to bring it back and tame it and discipline. And that's what I find is the most exciting challenge of fasting. And here we see Dhruv taking it to a whole other level. 5-year-old boy. In the second month, Dhruv ate only every 6 days. And for his eatables, he took dry grass and leaves. Thus he continued his worship. In the third month, he drank water only every 9 days. He remained completely in trance and worshipped the Supreme Godhead, who is adored with select verses. So, as such, it would be almost impossible to do this kind of meditation unless we become completely absorbed in trance, completely absorbed in meditation. And when that happens, then you lose all influence of the body and the mind. In the fourth month, Dhruv became a complete master of the breathing exercise, and thus he inhaled air only every 12th day. In this way, he became completely fixed in his position and worshipped the Supreme Godhead. Now, I'm not saying this is necessary for all of us, and probably too extreme, it's probably too difficult for us, but Dhruv was amazing. In the fifth month, Dhruv had controlled his breathing so perfectly that he was able to stand on only one leg, just as a column stands without motion, and concentrate his mind fully on the presence of God within him and all around. Here are some pictures of Dhruv just eating whatever little was around, the berries, the fruits, the grasses, in the beginning stages. And later on, standing on one foot. Dhruv completely controlled his senses and pulled them back from the objects of the senses. And in this way, he fixed his mind without diversion to anything else. When Dhruv thus captured the Supreme Being by meditating on him, he who is the refuge of the total material creation and who is the master of all living entities, the three worlds, the entire universe began to tremble. As Dhruv kept himself steadily standing on one leg, the pressure of his big toe pushed down half the earth, just as an elephant being carried on a boat rocks the boat left and right with his every step. When Dhruv became practically one in heaviness with Vishnu, the Supreme Being, the total consciousness, due to his full concentration and closing of all parts of his body, the total universe breathing became choked up, and all the great demigods in all the planetary systems felt suffocated. His energy spread throughout the universe. The demigods took shelter of Vishnu and prayed, "You are the refuge of all moving and non-moving living entities. We feel all living entities to be suffocating, their breathing process choked up. We have never experienced such a thing." So then Vishnu reassured them. He says, "Don't worry, this is all happening due to the severe austerities and determination of the son of King Uttanapad, Dhruva, who is now fully absorbed in thought of me. I will take care of this." So then Vishnu appeared in front of Dhruva. It describes here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the form of Vishnu was brilliant like lightning. And Dhruva, in his mature yogic process, was fully absorbed in meditation. When that form all of a sudden appeared, Dhruva became perturbed and his meditation broke. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the Supreme Godhead Vishnu personally present, just as he had been seeing him within his heart. When Dhruva saw Vishnu in front of him, he was greatly agitated and offered him respects. He felt flat before him like a rod. Right? Just they offer respect like that by falling flat completely, stretching out with one's face down towards the earth, and became absorbed in love of Godhead. Dhruva in ecstasy looked upon his Lord as if he were drinking him with his eyes, kissing his lotus feet with his mouth, and embracing him with his arms. Although Dhruva was a small boy, he wanted to offer prayers in suitable language, but because he was inexperienced, he could not adjust himself immediately. In other words, the words weren't coming to him. And because he was a young boy, he didn't have, very erudite, scholarly, knowledgeable words. So the Supreme Being, who is situated in everyone's heart, could understand Dhruva's awkward position. Out of his causeless mercy, he touched his conch shell to the forehead of Dhruva, who stood before him with folded hands. At that time, Dhruva became perfectly aware of the absolute truth and his relationship with all living entities. In other words, the knowledge, the jnana, then came to Dhruva. Dhruva, who in the future world would receive a planet which would never be annihilated, even during the time of dissolution, began to offer prayers. So this is an image of the demigods coming to Vishnu to appeal to him, and then Vishnu in turn going over to see Dhruva. Dhruva standing on one leg as he's worshipping Vishnu from within his heart. And then finally he sees him face to face. Vishnu in his four-handed form along with his carrier Garuda, the bird. Dhruva said, "My dear Lord, you are all-powerful. After entering within me, you have enlivened all my sleeping senses, my hands, legs, eyes, ears, touch, sensation, life force, and especially my power of speech. Let me offer my respects and respectful obeisances unto you. You are the Supreme One, but by your different energies, you create the total material world by your external potency. After creation, you are Supreme Person, and through the temporary modes of material nature, you create varieties of manifestation. In other words, all these living entities and all the different creatures are all created by you. O my Master, you are the only shelter of all persons who desire liberation, and you are the friend of all who are distressed. How therefore can a learned person who has perfect knowledge ever forget you? Persons who worship you simply for fulfillment of their desires or for sense gratification are certainly influenced by your illusory energy, Maya, and they are under the illusion of this world. In spite of having you, who are the cause of liberation from birth and death, foolish persons such as me desire benedictions from you. Because that's how Dhruva came to him, right? He wanted to be a king of an empire greater than that of his father. He wanted to be even bigger than his father. So he came with material desires, but those desires became purified. Dhruva said, the transcendental bliss derived from meditating on your lotus feet or hearing about your glories is so unlimited that it is far beyond the stage of Brahmananda or the bliss of meditating on your impersonal energy. O Unlimited One, kindly bless me so that I may associate with your great devotees who engage in your loving service constantly, for I am becoming mad to hear about your transcendental qualities and pastimes, which are eternally existent." Like this, he continued with his prayers. And then when he finished, the Supreme Being, Vishnu, who is very kind to his devotees, congratulated him, speaking as follows: "My dear Dhruva, I know the desire within your heart. Although your desire is very ambitious and very difficult to fulfill, I shall favor you with its fulfillment. All good fortune unto you. I shall award you the glowing planet known as the pole star, which will continue to exist even after the dissolution at the end of the millennium." So in other words, when the entire cosmos is wiped out, that pole star will remain. That would be awarded to Dhruva. No one has ever ruled this planet, which is surrounded by all the solar systems, planets and stars. After your father goes to the forest and awards you the rule of his kingdom, you will rule continuously the entire world for 36,000 years. Now this is in a different time, by the way, when people had different kinds of lifespans. perhaps in a different planet, I don't know, or a different realm somewhere, or no idea. And all your senses will continue to be as strong as they are now. You will never become old. Sometime in the future, your brother Uttama will go hunting in the forest, and while absorbed in hunting, he will be killed. Your stepmother Suruchi, being maddened upon the death of her son, will go searching for him in the forest, and she will be devoured by a forest fire. You will be able to perform many great sacrifices and also give great charities. In this way, you will be able to enjoy the blessings of material happiness in this life, and at the time of your death, you will be able to remember me. After your material life in this body, you will go to my planet. Having gone there, you will never come back again to this material world. Krishna says the same thing to Arjuna, by the way. He says that once you come to my abode, you will never return to this temporary and miserable world. Right? So how do you get to his abode? Through loving devotion. How do you get to loving devotion? By serving him, by loving him, by chanting his name, by falling in love with God, by hearing about him. Then Vishnu, on the back of Garuda, his bird carrier, returned to his abode as Dhruva looked on. Despite having achieved the desired result of his determination by worshipping the lotus feet of Vishnu, Dhruva then returned to his home. So, with that, we end this segment of the Bhagavatam. And I'd love to know your thoughts. Perhaps you have some thoughts on how you can develop your spiritual life. Maybe you're inspired. I know that you and I cannot do what Dhruva did. I know that we are not at that level. But there is a lot we can do. So I want you to take heart that if a little boy of 5 can do so much, we can do something. And that something is to become focused. I would say the most important thing is to become focused and to make God the goal of our life, more than all our material desires. Because when you have him, you have everything. And when you don't have him, no matter how much you have, you still have nothing. Even if you have the entire world, you still have nothing. Think about that. All right, I'd like to open things up for questions, and let's see if there are any right now. So I have a question from Ray here. He says, my question is, if we can develop any type of relationship with Krishna, best friend, devotee, lover, etc., how can we attain this? Knowing that humans like tangible relationships and the type of relationship ideal for us. So I think what you're asking me, Ray, is how do we develop that relationship with God, with Krishna? And how do we know which relationship is ideal for us? What a wonderful question. Thank you so much for that. That is a great question. First thing you've pointed out is that we like tangible relationships. And this is true. And so, ask yourself, which is the relationship that most captivates you? Which is the relationship that is dearest to your heart? Maybe it's that of your child. Maybe it's that of a lover. What is your innate nature? Some people are very paternal, some very maternal, some are very much lovers. What is your nature? Once you know your nature, read the stories of Krishna. You'll find the Krishna books on Amazon, translated by Prabhupada. The spelling is K-R-S-N-A. Look for that. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's called. And as you read the stories, you'll get to see how different people relate to him. This is the only place where you will find what the relationship with God looks like. There are many people who've talked about loving God. Even the Bible says to love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. But how do you love someone who you've never met or you don't even know anything about? Like if you were to ask someone in any religion, anywhere in the world, what does God do? What does God look like? If you say I should love God, well, how should I love God? What kind of love would it be? There's so many kinds of ways to love someone. right? The only relationship offered in most religions is that of father and child, that you're the child and God is the father. But the Vedas see that as just being a very basic level. There are much higher levels. How about if God were your child and you were the parent? And now you'd be worrying about him. And if you see in the stories of Krishna, Krishna is so naughty and mischievous and playful that his mother is constantly worrying about him. And as she worries about him, she's meditating on him. And as she's meditating on him, she feels immense bliss. But at the same time, she also worries about him. Oh my God, he's walked out there without his shoes on today. The stones on the ground are going to hurt his feet. Oh my goodness. He hasn't had a bath today. He hasn't eaten. She worries. But her worries are blissful because they're in connection with Krishna. The gopis, his lovers, have the same feelings. His friends experience similar things. But they have so much trust and so much love. So go within yourself. See what the stories are there, the Leela, the pastimes of Krishna, which he exhibited on this world, in this world, to show us what it's like to be with God. So study that, read that, savor that. And then as you do, and by the way, we'll be going into those in detail in the 10th canto. We're on the 4th canto right now of Srimad Bhagavatam. But the abridged version of those stories is found in the Krishna books. So do read that and you'll be able to see it. But to me, that's one of the most important reasons for following the path of bhakti and not the impersonal path. Because as you said rightly, Ray, we all want tangible relationships. So to me, that relationship with God is a tangible relationship. Now, you may say, well, I want someone who's physically there in front of me. Granted, we want that, yes. And that can happen in time. But first, form a relationship of the heart. It's like a long-distance relationship. First, form that relationship. And then the time comes, like it came for Dhruva, where he saw Vishnu, where he had the darshan, the seeing with his eyes, with his hands, he was able to touch him, where he was able to feel him. All of that can and will and does happen. And we'll be reading so many stories in the Bhagavatam of people for whom that happened. So I want you to know this is real. This is not imaginary. This is the greatest sages in the world sharing their experiences and the experiences of others that have had this with us. Seely's got some questions here. I like this one. The advancement to keep focus on the Supreme Being. One moment, it's gone away. All right, maybe it's here. The advancement to keep focus on the Supreme Being undisturbed is difficult. First is to learn to walk and then run. Of course, absolutely right. It is very difficult to stay focused. One of the meanings of the word meditation in Sanskrit, the real original word was not meditation. The original word was dhyan. Dhyan meant focus. So learning how to train our mind to focus is what we do in the initial stages, whether that's focusing on your breath through breathing exercises like pranayam, whether it is focusing on a mantra, or whether it is focusing on a deity that you can worship of Krishna and offering him incense and food and so on. All of that is designed to help us focus our mind on God. And those are the beginning stages. But once we develop a taste for hearing about him, for serving him, for chanting his name and the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This was the mantra that was taught today from Narad to Dhruva. If you missed it, if you were a little late getting here, I'll repeat it again. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So these mantras, they help us fix our mind on God. And then as the mind becomes fixed, it develops ruchi. Ruchi means a taste. You know, like when you develop a taste for something and you're like, you get a liking for it, and then you want to keep going back for that. And you want more and more and more. Now it's natural. So the beginning stages, it's unnatural. It feels a little, I have to kind of force myself to do it. But as you go further and you go deeper, like it's a simple thing, even when you exercise, right? In the beginning, it feels like a big strain. Then you start going regularly, and then you develop a taste for it. And now you can't even live without it. Your body doesn't want to stop exercising. And the same applies to relationships. When in the beginning, you're kind of like wary, but then gradually you develop an attachment to someone. Now you want to see them all the time, right? So it's the same with everything, and it's the same with God. As you develop that attachment, as you develop that taste, that relish, that complete attraction develops, and you want to keep going back again and again. Celia's got another great question here. I've heard it takes lifetimes, eons of time. Eventually, we all attain the state of being. Absolutely true. It does take lifetimes. But here's where it gets interesting. When there is mercy, kripa, when there is mercy, when you have divine mercy, blessings coming upon you, when you show your sincerity, that mercy comes and fills you up. But what is the symptom? What is the real quality within us that makes that available? It is when we are empty. See, when a cup is full, you cannot put anything else in it. When you are full of your own thoughts, your own opinions, your own desires, your own needs, well then there's no room for God to enter and fill you with mercy. But when you empty yourself, empty your mind, empty your thoughts, empty your opinions, empty your everything, your ego, your story, your all of it, just empty it out, then God enters easily. Now, it can happen in stages. It doesn't all have to happen at one time. It's not a zero-sum game that only when you have completely emptied yourself out. No, you will get help along the way. As you empty yourself out and as you make room for God in your life, you will find yourself being filled by these blessings. You will find that little by little, your mind becomes quieter, that you become more at peace. In the beginning, I had so many questions, but gradually all the questions disappeared and only answers began to emerge. Everything became crystal clear when in the beginning there was confusion. The mind became peaceful, where in the early stages it was agitated. In the early stages, I remember when I would sit down to chant the mantras, my mind would be 10 times more agitated and active than it was normally. So clearly, it made a big difference over the years. As time went by, as those blessings came in, as surrender became a deep part of my life, everything started to shift and happen very naturally. If you ask a seed, how will you grow into a tree? The seed has no idea. If you say, how will you progress spiritually? You have no idea. You simply have to water the seed with the water and the air and the sunshine, and gradually that plant will emerge. Although the plant itself does not know how it will emerge. It does not have any idea. Similarly, we have no idea how we will evolve spiritually. But as we allow ourselves to be nourished and nurtured by chanting the names of God, by meditating, by opening our heart, by allowing and making space within our heart for God, you will find that the root of this beautiful tree begins to fructify. It begins to grow. It begins to bear fruit. It will and certainly will happen. I can assure you of that. All right, so with that we'll end. And next time we'll continue to see what further happened with Dhruva. I wish you a wonderful night, and Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Krishna, Radhe Radhe, Shyam. See you next week.